What's going on, everyone? Troy from the Intraday Investors, and in this video I'm going to be going over my trade on Apple and Boeing and how I took two small losses. But the biggest takeaway I want you guys to get from this video is learning from my mistakes. Okay, so there's some things that I wanted to do differently that didn't work out, and I want to talk about those in this trade review. Okay, so as you can see, SPY pre-market levels, it started to sell off from highs of 263. We retested that level from previous highs, and we actually got rejected. So coming into the market, I never like to have a specific bias towards anything, long or short. So just because we were seeing a sell-off, I didn't want to come into the market thinking I'm just going to short, because I like to take what the market gives me, and this is a perfect example. Normally, what I like to do is I like to use SPY and correlate it with my trades because I talked about it in my previous videos. However, the market's performing. However, SPY is performing. Typically, never 100%. That's how the stocks that I trade, they perform the same. They kind of follow each other's trends. Okay, so my first trade on Boeing, that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay, so as you can see, we're going to be flopping back and forth from SPY and Boeing because that helps me justify a good trade or not. So my trade on Boeing, I entered a contract. The biggest takeaway I want you guys to get from this is understanding that you're going to have to put on some form of risk. Okay, so before every position you take, you got to understand that there's some form of risk involved. Okay, and you have to have a risk tolerance. And if it goes against your risk tolerance, you have to cut your losses, because the thing is, you can't hope for it to go back up. Okay, like for example, I entered the break of the first. See this high of this wick at 158 of this third 5-minute candle. Okay, we're looking at it in a 1-day. This is pre-market. This is real time, and you can see the third 5-minute candle set a high at 158 and sold off. Okay, and it bounced on the VWAP, and we're showing higher lows on the bodies and higher highs. You can see that we're showing a nice little bullish flag. And what I like to do is I like to buy when it breaks the high of the day. Okay, so as you can see, the third 5-minute candle, we set a high at 158, and we retested that level right here. With Boeing, considering that SPY was ripping, as you can see, SPY was ripping, and Boeing kind of, I wouldn't say had like a false pullback, but because I had the right idea, it broke the high where I wanted to. This candle broke the high right here. You can see that the SPY was ripping. I mean, it had a little bit of a pullback, and I cut my losses. That's sometimes that just happens when you trade. The trade, you have the right idea, you develop the plan, and you went to go execute, and the trade just goes against you. You can't get caught up and so emotionally attached to that trade. You have to separate yourself from this trade and separate yourself to your next trade. Okay, so what I like to do is like walk away from the screens, set alerts, so when I do regain my focus and I come back to my charts and screens, that I'm able to execute without hesitation, because I have mental clarity. I got my mind off it for a minute, and you always have to separate yourself from, like for example, my trading day today. Even though I took two losses, I'm going to separate today from tomorrow. I'm not going to be so caught up and emotionally attached to my whether I win or lose, because that will affect your trading. That will affect your trading. So you can see the trade wicked back against me, and that's where I ended up getting stopped out. And then it started ripping right after I got stopped out. And that's another thing. I took a loss. I took a small loss. I could have had a bigger risk tolerance, but it failed to break this resistance, and that just happens. The trade will go against you. You'll have the right idea, and in this case, it started to rip after I got out. And another thing traders tend to do is they'll look at what they could have made. I got stopped out, and yeah, I could have made another 120, 240 bucks if I held, but I stopped out early, and then I separated myself from this trade, and then I was looking for another opportunities. But you can see Boeing pulled back a little bit, and SPY was pushing up. Okay, so I should have had more confidence in this trade, and then it pulled back on me right here, and that's where I ended up cutting my losses. But it's really all about emotional intelligence, because if I expect to make 10, 15% on a trade, I got to put up some risk. So that's the biggest takeaway I want you guys to get from this is you got to put on some form of risk. If you're using a 5-to-1 risk/reward ratio, 1%, you got to understand, you got to put risk on, because you could play a conservative, but you're gonna get wicked out, you're gonna get stopped out, just like I did. I got stopped out right at this level, right here. I got stopped out, and then it just ended up spiking, or it just ended up ripping on me. It ended up ripping on me, and it ended up ripping just as well as SPY. And you can see that it was such a battle. It was such a battle on this candle right here. Just look at the shape of the candle. You look at where it closed and opened at. And I was so focused on Boeing trade, I ended up stopping out. And in the meantime, that was happening. Apple was showing a nice trade right here that I missed out. So that's another takeaway I want you guys to get from this is understand that you're going to put on some form of risk, okay? And understand that before every trade, you got to understand your risk tolerance. So when I come into my trades, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to risk 20, 40 cents per contract, depending on if I have good fundamental news behind me and more conviction on my trade. And another thing is, don't be so focused on one stock when there's a bunch of other opportunities. For example, Apple, that I missed out. I ended up executing it later in the day for another loss, which I'm about to get into right after this. But yeah, so that was a big move I missed. And then we're going to go over my trade or later in the day when I seen that it started to sell off and break the VWAP. So when I entered Apple, you can see the VWAP. We were definitely a little bit overextended. We test the highs from previous days, and we started to sell off. So I got in a little bit early. You can see the VWAP, the volume weighted average price, the purple line. I entered on this candle right here, okay, when it broke the VWAP, and it pulled back a little bit. What I should have done was I should have waited for the retest. It retested it, pulled back a little bit, because it had a decent pullback. So if I would have held on to it on that pullback, that could have reversed on me, and then I would have been screwed. I want to cut my losses tightly and let my winners run, because that's how you win in the long run. You have to protect your capital at all costs. But what I should have done was it retested that level right here, and then it started to pull back. Okay, so what I should have done was entered at the break of this part. So I had pulled, it came back, it retested, and then it broke it. You see that? So, and that's 258 all the way till 250. That's a nice move on the downside on Apple, which I ended up stopping out, because on that pullback, I had the right idea. I had the right idea. I stopped out on the pullback because it had a decent pullback right here. You see this candle and this candle? Who knows? I don't want to, I hope it's not a strategy. I want to cut my losses shortly if the trade goes against me. Okay. But what I should have done was re-entered right here. But I was just like done trading for the day. I took two small losses. But that's the thing, I took two small losses. Okay, so overall, it was a $68 loss day, and that's not bad for two trades. Because if the trade does go against me and I hold and I hold and I bag hold, that's how you lose all your money. You have to protect your capital. So what I should have done was the re-entry here. So that's the biggest takeaway from, don't be afraid to re-enter on a stock. It clearly retested, it pulled back, and then it ended up showing more momentum. You can see the SPY, same deal. Was showing a nice clean move on the downside as well. So I had some variables in my favor. I definitely should have had more risk on the table, because sometimes if you cut your losses too tightly, you'll end up getting wicked back, and there'll be a false pullback, and then you end up getting washed out of the trade. So you have to be careful with that. So you got to be strict on your stop loss and where you cut your losses, but don't be too strict where you're risking 10 to 20 cents per contract, because if the trade does wick against you, you're just going to get stopped out, and then that's less buying power you have. But if you're always willing to, if you could play like that, but if you got to be quick on the re-entry. So if it stops you out, you quickly could react, and don't hesitate for the re-entry, especially in this example right here. Okay. I hope you understand what I mean by that, because again, we're going to go over this again. It broke the VWAP. I entered right here. Okay. It started to pull back. We have this green candle right here. This 5 minute. We're looking at it in a 5 minute candles. And then this another, look at this candle right here. Look at that pullback right up there, right here. So like, you know, I had to cut my losses. This could have easily reversed on me and I would have been screwed. And I didn't even cut my losses. I cut my losses right around here. Okay. I was risking above the VWAP. That's one of my strategies I like to do. I like to buy and then risk VWAP. So regarding my trades, I wasn't really too mad on my trade with Boeing. I had the right idea. Maybe I could have had a little bit more confidence because the SPY was really ripping and maybe could have held on through that wick back on this candle. But, you know, I like to play it safe, you know, cut my losses short. And that's exactly what I did. So I wasn't too upset about this. You know, these trades happen. It's just time to just keep your chin up and then focus on another opportunity, not be so focused on one stock, and then start looking for other opportunities. And with Apple, you know, I think I could have performed a little bit better on this. I had a really early entry. I could have waited for the retest because you can see the better entry would have been when it broke this right here. I got it on this candle, so I got in a little bit early. I didn't wait for the retest, and then it broke right through. And that's the biggest thing on Apple. So I wasn't really mad about this trade. It just didn't. All I got to do is just re-enter on that second entry. Okay, and then I could have, you know, took a nice move down on the downside. And with Boeing, same thing. Don't be so caught up in watching Boeing because, again, I missed Apple. It had a great opportunity right here that I missed because I was too focused on Boeing. Yeah, that's about it for my Boeing and Apple trade. I hope you guys got something out of it. And that's it. So I hope you guys have a good one.